It's 3 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and start. If he happens to join us, that'd be wonderful. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and announce this as a special meeting of the Mason County Commission for 5/11/2021 to have discussions regarding our jail needs with KMB Architects. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Are you leading this one, Bill?
I am.
Then I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you take it from this point on.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Bill Valdez, partner at KMB Architects, and I'm acting as the project manager for this project. I'll let the rest of my team introduce themselves. Sherry?
Good afternoon. I'm Sherry O'Brien with KMB Architects, architect and partner in the firm.
Brian, you're muted.
Of course. Brian Belay with KMB Architects, associate with the firm.
And Bill, just so you know, Diane Zorn, that's maybe her, but it's also our main connection. Frank Pinter is Support Services Director, Sharon Trask Commissioner. Travis Adams is our Undersheriff, and he may have others in the room. Undersheriff, do you have others in the room with you?
I did see Kevin
I saw you
Hansen.
unmute, but we did not hear anything.
We had another Teams meeting set up at the same time. So I saw Kevin Hansen enter the Teams meeting and he left that one. So I wasn't able to let him know that there was this one.
Travis, is Kevin with you? We see you unmute, but we don't hear anything, Undersheriff. There he is. Yeah. You can shake your head up and down. Is he with you? No. Okay. Thank you. We have top quality equipment, guys. I've got a commissioner that can't do a picture, and we have an undersheriff that can't talk to us at the moment. We'll work through it. Go ahead, Bill.
You bet. Yeah, sometimes we've kind of experienced that if you're logged into one video platform, then it'll lock you out of the other one from doing audio, which that might be the case with the undersheriff, is they might still be kind of somewhat connected with the Teams, and so that's locking the audio on the Zoom. So that might be something to kind of check.
And you can always make it a point to just use your phone, and we'd be able to hear you through the phone as well.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey, there we go.
Perfect.
All right, I got the sheriff with me, just so you know, and I think Kevin's logging in on another line.
Excellent. Thank you, and welcome, Sheriff.
Yep.
So with that, we wanted to be able to kind of pick this up where we kind of left off at our last kind of our restart and kickoff and programming meeting a couple of weeks ago. So we wanted to be able to kind of finish reviewing the overall program, as well as to review some of the information that we've been able to analyze to date with regard to the existing sites, and kind of go over some of the development requirements that we've been able to find, and a very, very high level kind of analysis of those sites. We will go into a lot more detail on the site analysis and actually have test fits that will actually be laying out different options onto those sites, as well as some planning ideas for those sites and how they would work at our May the 24th meeting that is currently scheduled. But so the focus of this meeting is mainly to go over and finish going over the program and be able to receive all of your comments back to make sure that we have the program and the needs really locked down. So that was the focus that we had on that. And then I will review kind of the schedule at the end of this call, just to kind of remind, these are the updated dates of our meetings, and definitely appreciate Diane's time in kind of coordinating all that and with the county and being able to send out those updated Zoom calls. I think we've got all the meeting invites kind of finalized to be able to get the Teams meetings taken off, put the Zoom calls added, and change the dates to be able to work with everybody's availability. But we'll recap that at the end of this call as well. So with that, let me get this pulled over and I'll start sharing my screen, and we'll be able to kind of go back through the program. Okay. So let me get this scaled up so I can actually see everybody a little bit better. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. As we kind of talked last time, we were, as we're kind of going through and updating the program, the current overall program is 77,000 square feet, a little bit over. And the program and the target was 240 beds, which is where we're currently at. There's 194 beds that are currently in the main housing, and then we have an additional 46 beds that are programmed within the alternative housing unit. And that's kind of where everything stood. As we remember, I think at our last call, we wrapped up by jumping ahead and kind of going over housing and being able to incorporate comments on that. And we had already gone through the lobby, the courtroom, and the jail administration areas. So I think we are ready to go through the alternative sentencing, just to kind of confirm where we're at and be able to hit on the other kind of support spaces is the primary focus that I want to be able to go. So with that, let me click over to let's do this. Okay. So what we had, were there any kind of questions on that, first of all, before we kind of move forward? Okay. What we had here in the alternative sentencing area, we had a sub lobby that would again be located off of the main lobby for main access. It was about the size to be 120 square feet, which would be big enough to be able to have kind of a direct interaction at a front service window, as well as have 4 people be able to wait in this sub waiting area. Within that area for the alternative sentencing, we had a program supervisor that was in a private office, so 160 square feet, which is kind of in line with some of these other program-sized offices and functions, which would be large enough to have multiple guest chairs within the programs area or the program supervisor's office. We had discussed to be able to have 3 alternatives officers in hard wall private offices. So those are about 120 square feet, so large enough to be able to have 1 to 2 guest chairs for visitors to be able to be within those spaces. We had our UA restroom, and so this would also be a shared function with work release. So its proximity with work release was going to be important. We had also an adjacent space to be able to allow for the UA observation through a window. So that would have to be adjoining the UA restroom, as we kind of discussed and went through some different kind of adjacency and kind of planning, floor planning concepts as part of that discussion. Also within alternatives sentencing, we had a fingerprint station and photo station that would be just a small room to be able to secure the fingerprint station. So 64 square feet was programmed for that. We also had a storage room associated with this program, and mainly it'd have the monitoring equipment stored within it, the ankle bracelets, and then any additional UA supplies to be able to support the UA restroom. And then we had the alternatives classroom. So this was a fairly large space. We have it programmed as being 640 square feet. It's sized to be able to accommodate up to 16 people within the alternatives program. And a portion of this discussion was, which I highlighted here, wanted to be able to confirm that it would be shared, a shared use with the admin department as an admin conference room. And I wanted to be able to kind of confirm with the sheriff and correction staff that that's still the intent. Correct.
Yeah, it's hard to visualize it without seeing a floor plan.
Right.
So, and yeah, we can go that direction at this point.
Right. And we're already kind of working through some of that. And again, when we kind of talk more at the next meeting, we'll be able to show different departmental adjacencies as we're starting to work through them right now. But I think we have some ways to be able to illustrate and kind of show that will be able to work. Sherry's been spending a lot of time kind of figuring those adjacencies and proximities out. And so we think there's a way to be able to make this work. And we can definitely talk about that a lot more. So, okay, that's good. So that pretty much sums up the alternative sentencing department and program. And then, so we have a subtotal of about 1,600 square feet. And then we have some internal circulation to be able to add the corridors and internal walls. So we have a departmental area of just under 2,200 square feet. Then we roll into our staff support area. So this is, we want, and the discussion that we had was that you want this located inside the secured perimeter. So it'd be very convenient for your correction staff to be able to access it. And essentially what it is our locker rooms and shower rooms and support spaces for that, the staff. So we had a men's locker room to be able to accommodate 56 full height lockers and 8 half height lockers. So it allows you plenty of space of growth of staff. Then we have the male restroom and shower space to be able to, so it'd be sized to be able to meet all code requirements. We're anticipating 4 showers based off of the number of male staff that we would end up having at full build out to be able to accommodate that. And then we have our female locker room, which is sized to have 24 female or full height lockers and then 16 half height lockers. So then and again, this is kind of split, which you can see here on the right, to be able to kind of accommodate that 70-30 split between male and female officers, which is how this is organized right now. Then we have a dedicated female restroom and shower room. This would most likely have 2 showers within it to, again, be able to meet the code requirements based off of the number of occupants and female officers working within the space. We also incorporate into the staff support, the staff lactation or nursing room, which just needs to be a private lockable room with a sink and typically an under-counter refrigerator incorporated. And so since again, it's only needed for staff, we locate it here in the staff support section. And then we have kind of a series of other offices that we kind of talked about that seem to be make the most sense to kind of incorporate into the staff support area that would be accessible to kind of everybody. So we had a transportation staff office, which was 120 square feet. And so this was one question that we had. Should this be, based off some notes and some discussions that we had, is it better to be kind of located here in staff support? Is it better to actually be located in booking and intake, or somewhere else within the building based off of its the role of your transportation staff?
Probably booking and intake, Frank. Bill.
You bet. Okay. Okay. I will move that over there. And then we also had correction staff office. So this would be a bullpen configuration like we talked about, that have 3 to 4 report writing and computer terminals in kind of a more of a benching stand setup. And then all the cameras would be routed there, so they would be able to see them on split screens as well, of just what's kind of happening in real time throughout the facility. Then we also had a classifications deputy, which would be very similar to the correction staff office, also done in a bullpen setup to be able to have 4 sergeant stations located within that one larger space. And then we had classification officers, which will have been, again, another larger, excuse me, office to be able to accommodate multiple people in the same office. So again, a small kind of bullpen area for essentially 2 classification offices within that single space. And then we had a classification screening and interview room. And so, and we had noted that this one being proximity to booking, but wasn't sure if it needed to also be in proximity to the classification deputy and the classification officers. So should they all be shifted a little bit closer to booking and intake, or should they be somewhere else within the facility?
Booking and intake.
Okay. We'll move all those. And then we also had staff break room. And so this would be something that would be near the outside or part of the outside secure perimeter, seating for approximately 20 staff. And then obviously kind of a kitchen type of configuration with refrigerators, microwave sinks, and appliances to be able to support jail staff to be able to have their breaks and be able to have their meals there as well. And then what we had also talked about is that food from the kitchen, from the jail kitchen, is going to be able to be served or be able to be eaten here by the staff. Correct? That's still how you want that to be able to operate. So there needs to be somewhat of a proximity of the break room / cafeteria to the jail food service area. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And again, I know that's kind of hard to kind of visualize and everything else. We've been going through that and kind of we're working through some different scenarios and how that could be laid out. We actually think there's some options that we can do to really have those spaces in a close proximity to be able to make that facilitate that to work. And then finally, we have the Armory, which would be, so we're kind of located here within the staff support area, but it would be kind of pulled out and moved separately based off of the note that we had. It'd be really off of the secured Sally port and would be controlled by central control. But we did want clarification on that with when we had that discussion. Would we want the Armory to be in close proximity to the vehicle sally port, or literally kind of more in proximity to the main entry sally port, kind of connecting admin into the jail proper?
There, Bill? I'd say probably back towards the admin area,
Okay.
admin Southport area, more inside the jail.
Okay. So that should be fine. Then rolling over to intake and release, where this is where we have the vehicle sally port. So it'd be fenced off, partially covered roof over the doors. So similar to kind of some of those other facilities that you had toured, like a Skagit County Jail, where it's mainly an open air, a vehicle sally port, but a portion of it is covered so you're able to get out of the weather for the direct transport and unloading and onloading of in custody inmates. That we wanted to be its size to be large enough to be able to accommodate 2 Department of Corrections buses, be able to have it have multiple drive lanes so we don't block up traffic. And then these were some of the vehicle sizes that we had kind of talked about, including obviously, having an ambulance come through, transportation vehicles that you currently have, 3 13-person vans and 4 SUVs, and then would need to be able to accommodate other jurisdictional vehicles, and that those could be parked outside outside the fence, or if they're it's a arresting officer, would actually be transporting them in and through the sally port. So then once you get from the vehicle sally port and then come into the jail proper, there'll be a receiving area, which will be acting as a sally port unto itself. So this will function as your pre-booking area. So there will be a work counter for the arresting officer and act as that transfer from the arresting officer into the county. And then off of that, there'll be a law enforcement report writing room, which would be an 80 square foot, so a small space, small office that would have just some benching area to accommodate 1 or 2 computer carrels for the law enforcement, the police, to be able to finish writing their report. And then there would be a law enforcement restroom for them to be able to use before they leave the facility if they need to. It would also be available, obviously, as a staff restroom for the booking staff to be able to utilize. And then we also had a cleanup cell. So again, if someone again had anything on them or need to be kind of hosed off or cleaned up, that would be used. So that would actually have a floor toilet, floor drain incorporated into that cell. And then we also have an interview room, and this is kind of where I had a little bit of a question. So we had this interview room that we said mainly would be medical and our PREA advisement, and behavioral health screening would occur in there. But then we also had had as part of our discussions another kind of medical interview room that the booking deputies could use for medical assessments. So I'm wondering, is this starting to be duplicate? Do we need 2 spaces? Or do we just need 1 interview room that'd be able to be used by the staff as well as your kind of your medical staff.
We could probably go with just one.
Okay. So I'm going to leave this as part of the intake, and I'll get rid of this one.
Then that cleanup cell, does that have like an eye wash station in there?
We would have an eye wash station for your staff would be outside of that. It would be more in either the open booking area or probably the receiving area, or more in the booking area. So yeah, if something happens, that you'd be able to kind of go and be able to get that all cleaned out.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that? Would you rather have that in the receiving area or closer to really the booking space?
But I didn't know with the cleanup cell how you were saying when people come in, if they, need to be cleaned up, someone sprayed on the street and brought in.
Yeah.
Decontaminated right there.
Yeah, exactly. Decontamination cells, or if they happen to throw up in themselves and need to get kind of cleaned up or whatever. And there'd be a hose bib outside of the cleanup cell if need be for washing down the cell as well. So there'd be, that type of resources.
Okay.
Okay. And then we'd have clothing storage. So this would be just shelves and kind of a work table. We'd be able to wheel carts in and out to be able to bring additional kind of clothing for the kind of the dress in, dress out process within the intake area. Then we'd have a dress in room. So this would be 2 alcoves with curtains to be able to kind of partially close. And then there would be a shower within the alcove. So again, similar to be able to kind of support that cleanup cell and start the first step of the booking process. And then we have 4 single holding cells that will be kind of incorporated into this intake area. And that we would incorporate phones within the holding cells, and those phones would obviously be controlled by the staff station. And then we'd have 1 timeout cell with phones, and there would be a floor toilet. So there would not be this one would not actually have a combi unit within it. And then, so that pretty much kind of creates this intake component. And then we actually have then more of the booking component, while they're all going to be integral into the same space. So within booking, we'd have our property bins would be kind of in cubbies. So these would be lockable cubbies for our property bins once they've been taken from the inmate and before they get vacuum packed. So there would be no issues with that kind of the chain of custody of their property. And then we'd have the booking counter, which is essentially where all the processing of the intake processing would occur. So this would be 3 positions, 2 standing height and 1 at ADA height. This would be done to where the officer would be at a raised elevation and would be able to be at eye level while they're sitting, while the person going through intake would be at standing height. Within the booking counter, we'd have a fingerprint station and an area for that. We'd have a booking deputy office, which would just be an enclosed office. So just about 100 square feet, so a small office. We'd have a workroom there to be able to support the booking operations and the booking officer. So just like all the other workrooms, and have your office supplies, your copier, printer, and anything else you need to be able to support business operations. Then we'd have, as part of our property area, we'd have property processing. So there would be a work counter for officers to be able to go through, kind of sorting and organizing, getting everything to be sealed. There'd be also a washer and dryer incorporated into there. So if there's anything that's soiled or that needs to be dried before it gets vacuum sealed, that can be done, as well as a utility sink. And this whole area, again, wanting to kind of keep an eye on chain of custody, and that there'd be a camera incorporated into that space. Then we'd also have our property vacuum area where we'd be able to do final sealing of all the property in those sealable bags. And then adjacent to all of that would be the large property storage area. So this would be 680 square feet. So this was sized to be able to accommodate in fixed storage shelving, these totes that we'd end up having to be able to hold the vacuumed property sealed bags in, and multi-tier fixed shelving, and this would be able to accommodate your full build out of the number of beds you'd end up having into the space. So that's how that property area was sized for that. Then we'd have a staff restroom. But this was one question that I had, do we really need, because again, we're dealing with a space that with all of this is about 3,500 to 4,000 square feet. Do we need to have another staff restroom that would be probably more on the booking counter side of things? Or would staff be able to go out and be able to use the law enforcement restroom that would be more in the open booking to receiving area? Any thoughts on that?
All right, go ahead. Shane. So I don't know that I completely get the flow of this, Bill. Like, when they come in and we got to do a strip search, where's that going to be?
That would be the strip search would occur actually in the, well, actually you could do it in two. It could be done here in the receiving area, but what I anticipate would be more in the dress-in area there in those two alcoves.
Okay.
You go over there and do the strip search.
I don't know that we need another bathroom in booking. I mean, if it's going to be adjacent there, I mean, we could just make that a staff restroom.
Yeah.
What about the holding cells will have toilets in them, so the inmates can go to the bathroom in the holding cell, right?
You could, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think we can do with one.
Okay. And yeah, so essentially the kind of the flow is similar to what some of those other facilities that essentially that we did, is that you'd kind of have this kind of receiving area, and then into kind of these intake processes, which you can have. Obviously, the holding cells are going to be both off of and in proximity to both the booking as well as the intake areas, and kind of functions. Really, everything's is open and in close proximity here. And then the booking counter will be literally, we'd want to lay it out in a way that kind of aligns with how your standard operations are going to be with regard to, taking a property, and then, fingerprint, photo, taking all the additional information, medical evaluation. We want to lay all that out. So literally everything is in a very systematic process, so we're not having to kind of move people around and kind of cross them over as they're going through the process. So that's what we want to work through with you, is exactly aligning everything, so literally systematically they just move from one station to another.
So that body scanner's got to go in there somewhere, right?
Right.
You got to take up quite a bit of real estate.
Yeah, that I was anticipating that would be done and held, and that's why we oversized this slightly. I could add this as a note in the receiving area.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
Yep. So that was already kind of oversized to be able to do it. Yeah, the body scanners take up quite a bit of space, but essentially you want to make sure that there isn't anything that you're not aware of before you really take them into intake booking area at all.
You mean on the person before search wise, or what are you talking about?
Yeah, because you do probably a pat down before you
Yeah.
have them go through the body scanner, right?
Yep.
And then from there, then there shouldn't be anything. Then you can go and take them into the dress in, dress out, and do a strip search if you need to.
Actually, we're dressing in, dressing out before the body scanner.
Okay, you're going to do it that way.
Yeah.
So that just means we probably have to kind of reorganize this a little bit.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so that's where first step of the process that we had talked about. So I think we just need to kind of see how we want that to kind of occur. That might actually be closer to kind of the cleanup cell. That literally we have a cleanup cell. So literally you get somebody and you can get them directly off the Sally port, get them into the area, but literally have the dress in, dress out directly adjacent to that. And so it's almost part of kind of this receiving area, pre-receiving area. So I'm going to actually move these up to ahead of this, just from a process standpoint, that we'd be kind of getting up into that. And then we have this. But we'll get into a lot more of this as we actually go through kind of, layout and kind of adjacency work. So then we get down to, so we didn't need that since we have that covered elsewhere. And then what we had talked about is doing and having a separate release area. So there's not any really crossing over between people coming into the system through the intake and booking process and releasing from the system. So essentially we'd have a release counter, one position, ideally that would be in close proximity to the intake and booking counter. And then essentially the same officer would end up doing that interaction for both the release, or could do that interaction for both the release and the intake. We'd again have a dress out alcoves, so 3 alcoves with curtain located across from the property window. So again, we're kind of getting that process all aligned. We'd have one group holding, which would accommodate larger amounts of people, about 15 to 20 occupants potentially, for kind of a large group release that you could be doing. And then 2 single holding cells. And again, the single holding cells are going to be sized to be able to accommodate maybe 1 up to maybe 3 occupants within each of them, as that, and those would all be along this release corridor. We'd also have a laundry cart for all the soiled clothing in close proximity to the dress out space. So again, we'd be able to put all those, the jumpsuits in them to be able to then take them back to laundry when they get full. There's also was a discussion about having a storage room to be able to support anything with regard to transport, which would be like, again, any ankle or wrist bracelets, and then kind of anything else associated with the transport officer. Also with regard to the storage, which would have those wraps and the restraint chairs would be stored in those areas, in that as well. And this storage would be in proximity to support both release as well as intake and booking areas. So we just have to kind of work through what's the best place to be able to put that. Any questions on the whole intake and release component? All right. So then going over to the health services So the medical component. So what we had, that you didn't need an office for the medical director, since they'll be coming a couple of days a week and should be able to kind of use the other spaces that are already being provided within health services. And that we'd have one office that would be what we're calling it the nurse supervisor, which again, the medical director would be able to utilize as well. So this would be a 160 square foot office, so fairly standard size office. Then we had a psychology room to be able to do kind of part of their telemedicine, so 100 square foot room for that. We had a health services workroom. So again, just like we talked about with booking and intake, your copier, your office supplies, any other kind of files and storage that needed to happen would all be within the workroom. Then we had a nurse's station, and that this would be split between clinical and medical housing, and would have a space large enough for 2 to 3 workstations within it. We'd have an inmate restroom. This would be adjacent to the lab, the medical lab and functions kind of going on. So we didn't, well, let's see. Then we had the medical lab we talked a little bit about that wasn't necessarily really required since most of the lab work is done on contract. We had a clean utility and a dirty utility room, so that with utility sinks and big enough to be able to accommodate carts for transport. We had equipment storage room dedicated to health services. So this would have shelves and be able to store wheelchairs and other equipment. Then we'd have our secured medication storage. So this would all be lockable and secured to also have your med carts for medical distribution within the units. And then we had 2 holding cells. As what we discussed, these would actually be located at the very front of the front entrance into the health services area off of the main circulation corridor of the jail. So transport would be able to bring and drop them off there into the holding cells. And then as medical staff are able to receive and kind of bring them into this department, they'd be able to move them out of those holding cells into a treatment room or into one of the other functions occurring within the space. Then one of the holding rooms would be larger to accommodate about up to 8 individuals. The other one would be a single holding cell. These would not be wet cells, so these would be dry cells because they're not going to be in there very long. Then we had 1 treatment room. The treatment room would also act as the X-ray area with mobile X-ray and dental. Then we'd have 2 exam rooms. So these would be a little bit smaller than the treatment rooms. And they would have, just like the treatment rooms, would have a sink and some counter space incorporated into them. We'd have a staff restroom incorporated into here, as well as a very small staff break room, essentially the size of a small office. So they'd be able to lock up and secure any personal effects, as well as be able to have a sink and small refrigerator and microwave to be able to support them staying within the space. We'd have a negative pressure cell with a shower within it. We'd have an ante room outside of the negative pressure cell. So essentially you'd go into the ante room and then from there directly into the cell. And then we'd have 8 acute mental health medical cells within the suite. And biohazard staging area. So this would be its own kind of secured closet that you can kind of store biohazard until the contracting company that you have that's dealing with it comes in and be able to grabs it and disposes of it for you. And that biohazard would either be directly adjacent to or within the vehicle's the sally port, the sally vestibule that has direct access to your vehicle sally port just outside of it. So the one question I had is that what we talked about is the need for 8 now and then 2 for the future. Are you wanting us to plan for the full 10? Okay. All right. And then we'll go into the programs area. So within programs, we have mainly classroom space, but we also have the dog therapy program is also part of this area. So we have a workroom, so materials, storage, work counters would all be incorporated in there. Any printers for printing material if need be. Another staff restroom. We'd have a storage room for defensive tactics, since what we actually talked about is being able to use this multi-purpose room that's part of the inmate programs actually for staff training, including defensive tactics. So we'd have this large storage room to be able to store all your mats as well as your other defensive tactics equipment. We'd have the large multi-purpose room. So this would be able to accommodate about 20 to 25 people. That this room would be dividable in an ideal situation to be able to split it into a smaller space. And like I said, to be used for defensive tactics training and other trainings for staff. Then we'd have a medium multi-purpose room, classroom, that'd be more for your technology kind of lab for your inmates. So it'd be 10 to 13 people would be in a classroom setting, and then be able to have up to 12 computer stations to be able to provide those programs for your in custody. Then we'd have 2 small rooms that would be for interview. So these could be for one-on-one, but then they also could be used as being interview rooms, and they'd be wired up as such for video and audio in one of them. So this would be more for, if you're wanting to be able to, as part of an ongoing investigation or anything kind of going on within the facility, you could be able to bring them and just send an inmate to programs area and then be able to have an officer there to be able to do an interview. Then we have some general storage associated with the programs area at 100 square feet. And then we had the library storage. So again, this is one thing I was kind of wondering, do we want to plan to still have this? I know that you're wanting to transition more to being a digital format where the inmates would be able to just get library and programs on a tablet or some other type of technology system incorporated really into your inmate management system. Do you want us to still plan for this small library storage for actually hard books?
Yeah, I think you should probably keep it. It never hurts to have storage space.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, it's small. It's 60 square feet.
That's not very big.
Yeah. And then we do have an inmate restroom, so that way you're not having to transport anyone back when they're in the programs area back into the housing area. And then we have the dog therapy program. So this was going to be 5 kennels, and it would be maybe removed from the programs area. Maybe the programs area is in closer proximity. but would be closer proximity to that work release. Dormitories that we had talked about previously underneath the housing. And then there would be a small 160 square foot treatment and procedure and bathing room. So again, that would be a large kind of stainless steel kind of service sink to be able to clean the dogs, wash the dogs down with floor drains within the treatment room. And then there would be a dog run area. Question that we kind of had, which we didn't have documented, would the dog run area, would that be open air, so have access to outside air to the sky, or would that be all enclosed within the building, or do you have a preference?
I don't really make it, doesn't make a difference to me,
Okay.
however it works out.
Okay. So we'll deal with that then later. Okay, then we get into, which we already kind of talked about, the alternatives housing, which we already kind of said and went through last week, which again, these are going to be dormitories, male, female, work release, work crew would be in a series of dorms, and then your inmate worker program would be in a different set of dormitories. So we don't have that cross-contamination that might ultimately be occurring. And then we'd have a screening room for the work release and work crew that are coming in. So you can do, pat down or strip search or whatever needs to happen there to make sure that there's no contraband coming into your facility. So then moving on from there, we have our food service and laundry. So this is much more of your support programs. So within food service, we have our open kitchen area. You currently have a food service vendor, and they're also providing meals to your juvenile population within the county. So we need to kind of plan for that quantity of meals and meal preparation. So this open kitchen area would be essentially where you'd have all your equipment for both prep as well as for cooking of the meals. Then we'd have a dedicated wash area. Again, all this would be very open for lines of sight and control, since this would be all run with your inmate worker program. And so this space would be within and have good lines of sight from the office. You would have an office that would have 2 workstations. Ideally, it'd be raised and have windows to be able to observe both the kitchen area and the wash area. You'd indicated that Summit was the current vendor and had a contract in place from 2019 to 2024. So we just wanted to capture that. Then we had everything for your food storage. So we had a dedicated dry storage area of 440 square feet, walk-in freezer, which is 280 square feet, a walk-in cooler of 200 square feet, and then a thaw cooler, which was about 120 square feet. So these would all be kind of ganged and grouped together and would be in recessed floor. So you'd have 0 floor transition entry into all 3 of these walk-in cooler and freezer spaces. Also within kind of the open kitchen area, we were going to incorporate as part of your programs area, the inmate worker kind of break area and learning area, so you can actually do skills development and safety trainings within that. So it'd be like have space big enough to have a couple of tables and a whiteboard to be able to do that programs there. We'd have a receiving area for all of the produce and frozen goods that are all coming into the facility. So that would be in close proximity to the loading dock. Then we'd have a inmate restroom within the food service area, and then a janitor's closet that would be dedicated there and could be secured for chemical storage as well. Any questions on food service? Okay, and again, this is designed to be able to accommodate the existing your existing population that would be planned. If the facility in the future ever gets expanded, essentially the only things that would be needed would be additional freezer or cooler space that could actually be done outside the facility, in the loading dock or kind of elsewhere, and then transporting that additional food products into the facility. Or you just have to be on a little bit more regular ordering process to be able to bring that in. But essentially, we'd be able to accommodate within the kitchen, adding a couple of small, a couple of pieces of equipment to be able to accommodate larger amounts of meal prep that would actually be able to occur, which is a kind of a nominal size, is how this is all programmed. Then we have our laundry and kind of commissary area. So we have, since it's trustee managed, there's no office. So we captured that. So there wasn't kind of any confusion there. We'd have our open laundry work area. So this would kind of have your really folding tables and just area for everyone to be able to work within as part of your inmate work area. We'd have clean storage. So this would be right off of and part of that open work area. We'd also have cart staging and storage for our mobile carts, going back to booking, going to housing areas. And then on really the back side, we'd have chemical storage that would either be in a secured room or would just be behind the washer and dryers, which are going to be behind a cane screen. So the inmate workers would not have access except for the front faces of the pieces of equipment. And then we'd have clean laundry and soiled laundry distribution. So this would just be some open floor space to be able to support those different carts coming in. We'd have an inmate restroom. So the inmates could be there. Inmate workers would be able to be there for their whole shift that they're working within the laundry area. And then we wanted a storage room for additional mattress and bedroll storage, which would all be either adjacent or within the laundry area. And then a very small a storage room for commissary. That's essentially kind of the way we understand the discussion, is that commissary is really done and kind of outsourced, and that this would essentially be kind of more of a short-term holding to be able to kind of put it before you actually go and take it out to housing to distribute commissary. Does that all sound correct? Anything we missed?
Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. So we already went over housing. So then the last component is really maintenance and building systems. So we had a maintenance office. So again, 160 square foot office. We had some general storage to be able to support maintenance, 300 square feet, and then a 300 square foot shop area. So this would be kind of a workbench area, kind of in this as a center island, and then being able to have kind of tools and other kind of support functions just on the walls, kind of surrounding within that workshop area. There would be a dedicated welding room that then would have a fume hood within it. So if there's any welding that needs to happen for any doors or any other equipment that's within the facility, they'd be able to do that here on site. And then what we talked about is, so this wouldn't be in the maintenance area, but wherever we have rooftop access, the maintenance would be able to accessing the roof, which also your corrections officers would be able to access the roof to be able to do their security checks. That we'd have a storage room or storage area up there to be able to store filters and anything else from a maintenance standpoint. So you're not just constantly kind of taking things from the mechanical maintenance area up onto the roof. It's pretty much staged right there for accessing most of your mechanical equipment, which is going to be roof mounted. Then we'd also have a receiving sally port. So this would be off of the loading docks or any other kind of supplies, main supplies coming in for the operations of the facility would come through the receiving sally port. And then as I described, we'd have and need to be able to plan floor area for a stair to be able to have direct access, both for maintenance staff, for accessing all the rooftop equipment, but also for correction staff to be able to access the roof for security checks. And then building systems. So again, these are all really based off of the size of the facility. And so we have a mechanical room to be able to accommodate whatever mechanical system ultimately we end up selecting. But again, this would have your pumps, this would have your chillers, your hot water heaters, your boilers would all be within a mechanical room. We'd also need electrical room based off of the electrical service. Most likely we need to be able to have it on an exterior wall. So we'd be able to have two forms of egress out of your main electrical room. We'd also have information systems or your MDF, your closet or room that essentially would have all your network and telecommunications equipment would all be held within that. Since we don't want to mix kind of your general low voltage, which would be in your MDF or your information systems room, we'd have a separate closet for all of your security electronics because they'd be served by two different contractors and staff. And so we want to make sure that that's actually secured separately. So all your security electronics for your cameras, for your access controls would all be in that security room. And then we wanted to be able to accommodate the staff restrooms and janitor's closets and these other kind of general storage needs that would be needed. So we accommodated those in here as well to be able to redistribute them all the way out and about. Essentially, this would accommodate, about 3 to 4 staff restrooms. And this would be able to accommodate about 4 to 6 janitor's closets, depending on the size and that we end up designing those closets to be able to have, and what other equipment we need to be able to store within those janitor's closets. So that's how we end up kind of incorporating that. So that is all the different program spaces that we have. And that's how that all kind of rolls up into here. So based off of some of those adds and reductions and modifications, now we're at 77,846 gross square feet. And then the departmental, so essentially that would be the actual net usable square foot of all the different rooms, plus the internal corridors within those spaces is just under 71,000 square feet. Based off of that, and essentially this is like we just talked about, would be a single level jail with the exception of the mezzanine, which would be for within housing or this is what's anticipated, except for what's within housing and the central control room, which would be also elevated. So when we end up taking the mezzanine housing out and we take the central control out, what we're left is essentially what the footprint of the building would be. So based off of this 77,846 square foot building, about 69,000 square feet of that would be on the first floor. So we need to be able to have land and property and buildable area to be able to accommodate, 69,000 square foot footprint of a building. And one thing that we also talked about a little bit is that we need to be able to provide public parking as well as staff parking. And so what we have is a 20 stall public parking area. So this would be for any vendors, any contract staff, any of the public coming to the facility would all be coming and parking in that parking lot. So we provide 20 stalls. Code compliant portion of that would be ADA stalls. And then we'd have staff parking. So again, this would be for correctional staff. And we'd have 20 parking stalls for that, which should be enough to accommodate shift change. And then we'd have 6 additional stalls for county vehicles. So this would be for more maintenance and any other kind of county vehicles. So this would be if you have transport vehicles or anything else that we'd store them within these 6 parking stalls. And then we'd need to be able to have, our dumpsters, recycling, compost, whatever that might be, kind of center and circulation around it for your garbage disposal to be able to kind of come and be able to pick up those areas. So there's a lot of circulation to be able to accommodate that. So by incorporating those and the square footage need to be able to accommodate all of those spaces, essentially what we get is roughly a site area of about 88,000 square feet. And then when we end up saying, okay, well, we need to have, our roads and our loop roads for security and roads to be able to get into the public parking and the staff parking and everything else, we incorporate that. So we're adding about another 44,000 square feet to be able to accommodate site circulation. And then no matter where, which we'll talk a little bit about here shortly, with different sites that we select, there's going to be different site requirements, whether it's landscape islands within the parking area, landscape buffers, setbacks for development, and utility easements and those type of things. So we need to add some additional square footage to accommodate potentially that. So we add another 44,000 square feet there. So in rough numbers, what we have is that we need to be able to have about 176,000 square feet. Again, each site's going to be different based off of its development requirements and setbacks and everything else. But this is a good planning number, at which that equals to about 4 acres. So from a planning standpoint, we'll need roughly about 4 acres. Obviously, if this is in more of a downtown area where, where maybe we don't need to be able to provide nearly as much on-site parking, because off-site parking can actually be offset, or, the site circulation and traffic patterns are going to be a little bit different. Maybe this can be a little bit smaller, but from a planning standpoint, we need to be, based off of the size of a building, we need to be looking for something roughly about 4 acres. So any questions on the program or kind of how we've kind of come to these values? Okay, with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn this over to Brian Belay, and he's going to bring up the 3 the sites that we've been provided, and we wanted to be able to kind of talk a little bit about those, and essentially where they're where their proximity actually is within the county, and then kind of a high level assessment that we've done of them so far. So I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Bill. So this is a document that we put together based on the 3 sites that we were given. Frank provided parcel numbers and locations for us, and we kind of went on the GIS parcel mapping service, Google Maps, and just did kind of any research that we could to find some of this high-level information on each site. So what we did was kind of organized it and kind of gave a graphic of what it would look like within the vicinity. So here you can just kind of see all of Mason County, and this blow up on the left is this yellow rectangle right around Shelton. And here's the city boundary of the city of Shelton. And here we show site 00, which is the existing site, showing, you know, there's bus lines and the sheriff's office and fire department right next to it. And the other 2 sites that were proposed, what we're calling the 101, 102 intersection. So this is a Mason County property. And alternate site number 2 over here would be the West Ailes Hill property. Is that pronounced right? Ailes? Yeah. Okay. So that one's the one next to the motor sports park and transfer station. And we kind of outlined some of the vicinity essential services. So you got fire, each has a different fire district, and we're showing kind of the proximity to those. Then we've got the bus line. So this is Mason Transit Authority Route 7, which covers a lot of the city of Shelton, and really the closest bus stop to these other 2 sites would be this guy here. And we looked, and there's not very good pedestrian crosswalks, none provided along 101. So if that's a concern for work release and how they get to and from work, we don't know if they have cars, but if they're kind of relying on the transit, there's not really a good bus stop near that location.
How do folks get to and from, for those that are on work release? How do they get to and from their jobs? Do they park at the jail itself?
Most of the time they have their own transportation.
Okay.
Okay. So here's a close-up of option 0, which is the existing site. Obviously, it's the smallest site, and just for comparison's sake, we wanted to show a 5-acre area. We just kind of rounded up. The program shows 4. I think it was at like 4.4 at one point. So we rounded up and show a 5-acre here. This blue rectangle is the 70 square feet or 70,000 square feet for the building footprint. As you can see, it's literally the entire site that we were given, including the West Cedar Street, if we would be able to take that over. There's obviously some logistic conflicts there. You've got your existing jail, phasing requirements, and what we understand to be a creek that runs underneath Cedar Street. We have our civil engineer looking into that a little closer, and what that means for putting a building above that. We've got a bunch of existing buildings here, building 6, building 3, and building 4 with Mason County that we'd have to relocate. And obviously this jail would have to, a portion of it at least, would have to remain in use during construction of most of it. But the obvious advantages to this location is obviously right next to the courthouse. It's close to the sheriff's office, right downtown, close to all the facilities, next to the new district court, Superior, and nearby support buildings. So site number 2, we've got the 101 and 102 intersection. We were provided these 8 parcels here. What we understood to just be all of Mason County property. But we were told that only 2 of these sites would be used. But we kind of did the research for all of them. There's the Public Works Department that has all these buildings up here. There's this unbuildable area, if you can kind of see those contour lines. And I think that's every 5 feet increments. So that's, that it's fairly steep. So we can't really build out that side. And down here in this green field where all the trees are, that's a fairly flat slope. This 5-foot difference from this end to here. And again, we show the 5-acre shade with the 70,000 buildings footprint. So it looks like we can definitely fit it into one of these parcels without needing to, share. And each of these smaller ones are 6.1 thereabouts. So do we know yet which one we would, or which 2 we would be able to choose from if we were to kind of dial this down and look closer at one of these parcels?
I think that we were just looking at the options so far.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Netherland. I think we were just looking at the options.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, there is nothing specific, but of course, again, I almost hate to even add into all this, but what you're looking at here, if you're going to pick one, it would be one of the ones that are the least valuable for reseller usage. And being up here on the front, road frontage would definitely not be preferable.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's this Public Works Drive here that, it's all within the property. So, taking a property such as this one that doesn't have access, to the Dayton Airport Road or 101, well, we can definitely look at that a little closer.
Like Brian had said, the sloping and the services and utilities are all pretty similar to each one of these. So I think we'll just kind of start our next round of looking at one of those internal parcels.
And then the alternate site number 2, which is the one that's next to the Motorsports Park. It's 98 acres. So we would just take a little corner of that. Again, the 5 acres shade with a 70,000 building footprint. And then we got a side-by-side information chart here that kind of lists all the information on each site, so you can kind of compare each one, each parcel size, total parcel property area. We listed the buildings on site and the zoning development areas based on what was provided in the parcel map. The one downtown, it was listed as a commercial residential mix, and alternate site 1 was listed as a Shelton urban growth area. We found multiple sources that showed they were both public institutional, and that the other 6 ones were general commercial.
I don't see anything on your spreadsheets that show what we have for utilities that are there or nearby. For example, the one down on Eels Hill, that would have a latecomer's fee at this point for hooking up to water. Probably the same would go for the one right there on the intersection of the highway as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the next run when we put the sites when they put these floor plans on the site. We have our civil engineer, KPFF, helping out with utilities and storm drainage, other site information that we can get. And they have their own spreadsheet that will kind of update this with that information. So you said that they have a sewer system down that side? They don't use a septic?
No, I was saying that there is water going straight down that highway. But if you did try to hook into it, there is a very, 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 very large latecomer fee.
Wow. Okay.
And Bill, yeah, I spoke with Alberto and he said that they're still waiting on, they had some calls in, and so they're still waiting for some of that information to come through. And based on our research, it just looks like whatever site that we do choose, we're gonna have to go through a special use permit for any kind of jail, new building, or even an add-on to the existing site. I mean, the existing site is already a jail, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But the other two sites, regardless if they're listed as long-term commercial forest or public institutional, we're gonna have to go through a special use permit. We also have some travel distance times to some of these special essential facilities. Obviously, everything's really close to the existing property, but everything is within 10 minutes of the other site, and within 12 and 13 from the third site.
Did you share this PowerPoint with us?
Yes, we'll
Yes.
package up the updated program and this document, and we'll send it out to all of you immediately following this call.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
One thing also I'd ask is when we're done with this, that you round me up some numbers. I saw numbers that you had off to the side, but I'd like to hear from you that that's the numbers that you're talking about. The cost of the building, the cost with the space, the cost of land acquisition, the cost of infrastructure placement into the land acquisition. And I'm just looking at a round number because what I'm seeing, I need to hear it from you.
Yeah. Yeah, we can provide some of that. It's going to definitely, we'll give you a range because, again, we haven't been able to really go through a lot of those site development costs, as well as kind of other more detailed materiality discussions with the jail or with Frank about. So we'll have to kind of have a bit of a range to kind of work from. But we can at least provide you a rough order of magnitude based off of other similar facilities that are either under construction right now or are kind of in the process or recently completed. Okay. That was what we had to present. So we wanted to kind of make sure we went through the program verification process, this was great. And be able to kind of get the square footage kind of locked down, be able to kind of show and get a little bit of feedback on the sites that are being evaluated. Like I said, we're going to have a lot more information, especially on the site development costs, utilities, and kind of infrastructure, those fees, those services, and the viability for that at our next meeting. And so let me pull that up. And I can share this and so as I discussed, that we're here on May the 11th to do program verification here in a couple of weeks. On Monday, May the 24th, we have our our initial site review and test fit. So that's where we're actually going to be going through and showing some graphics on actually how the facility would lay out and set on the site. And then and be able to bring more of that information from KPFF, the civil engineer, to bear to provide some additional clarity on that, Commissioner. And then about 2 weeks following that, on June the 1st, we'll have concept design options. So this will be kind of going to even a higher level for site development, as well as adjacency of different departments, and really kind of getting into a little bit more of the weeds on how that's going to lay out and be able to work and function on the different sites. And then later in June is once we've really have an understanding of kind of the preferred option and preferred site to and continue to analyze, we will have the preliminary cost models. And we would like to be able to come out of that with a preferred option to do our final cost model on. So we'll on the June the 21st, which I will give it to you, Commissioner, kind of a range to kind of go from, but our real more developed and understanding of costs will actually occur and be presented here on June the 21st. And then of the preferred option, we'll have a final cost analysis and model, which would also include project costs. So that would be our recommendation of everything from site development fees, design services fees, FF&E, and all those other things that are going to kind of create the overall project cost will be incorporated and provided there on July the 19th. We'll also have a draft report, which would have all the pieces and parts of the preliminary work that we did, as well as the work that we're doing right now and we'll be doing over the next couple of months. We'll do a page turn and review of that, in addition to those final cost model reviews and discussions. And then based off the feedback and input from that, we'll incorporate all that into a final document, which we'll deliver on July the 29th is the schedule as of right now. So that's where everything kind of stands. Again, these meeting dates have all been sent out. And the Zoom calls and information has been added to each one of those. And so that's kind of where the anticipated schedule looks like over the coming months.
And that rough number?
Let me look at that. I'll shoot you some information on that. I want to do some research because I didn't do some research up ahead of this on something that would be applicable. So I want to do some additional research, which I can do this afternoon and be able to send that to you.
So Bill, I'm going to say the last time we had a meeting, I tried to give you a little bit of a heads up. There's an expression, know your client. I still haven't heard from you, and there's a lot that you've missed that you don't know. And it's a bummer because we're going through all this time on it, and there's some drop dead things that you're not going to be able to get around because we can't. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that we're doing all this without that knowledge. But I'll let it go for the moment. Hopefully you will contact us and we'll have some further discussions.
Sounds good.
Does anybody have any final questions before we adjourn? Hearing none. If there's no objection, Commissioner Trask, could you go ahead and make a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
I'll second. Without objection, we are adjourned. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.